Hello and a very warm welcome to Accenture Presents ETStudios Digital Compass in association with ETCIO. I'm your host Devina Lasson. Now we at ET are thrilled to bring you this series where we take a look at all the initiatives that are required to build a future digital society. On this episode, we deep dive into the topic of security, the elephant in the room. Now, with economic uncertainty and global tensions on the rise, cyber attacks too are surmounting to a great extent. This is done by groups and organizations that are increasingly developed and structured. So in this episode, we deep dive into the best practices in cybersecurity, including the use of intelligent digital cyber twins and how this might very well be the future in all organizations and businesses in cybersecurity. Without further ado, I'd like to warmly welcome our guest today. We have with us Kushal Jadhav, Associate VP and CISO, Aditya Birla Sun Life Insurance.
Thank you, Devina.
Welcome. And Mukesh Chandra Mohan, CISO, Aditya Birla Capital.
Thank you so much.
Welcome, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have you here today. At the onset, I'd like to invite you just to give a small introduction to yourselves and your background when it comes to the security world.
So hi, I'm Kushal Jadhav. I've been working as CISO with Aditya Birla Sun Life Insurance for the last 5 to 6 years. Been in the cybersecurity industry for around 15 years now. Worked majorly with BFSI segment institutions, banks, broking institutes, as well as securities. Primarily, my experience is into life insurance. That's where major of my experience has been. And thank you so much for inviting us for this discussion.
Thank you, Kushal. Mukesh.
Hi, myself, Mukesh Chandra Mohan. I am a cybersecurity practitioner, having 2 decades of experience across verticals, which is banking, financial services, and IT and IT-enabled services, and automobile manufacturing. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to have you both. So at the onset, I'd like to request both of you to help set a foundation to help our viewers understand what is the nature of the cyber threats that exist today, how this is impacting enterprises, and some of the solutions that are being seen industry-wide.
Sure. So, to begin with, the landscape today has, completely changed from a cybersecurity perspective than it was, even 5 years ago. We are constantly in a state of adopting new digital assets. Everything is getting digitized. With, the pandemic, the push and the thrive for, being more digital forward for organizations has put a lot of assets on the digital world. Now, when we talk about assets on the digital world, we are talking about assets that are, exposed to the internet. And that's where, the problems for us security practitioners come. We're talking about an increased attack surface. Now, an attack surface, when we're talking about a volume and a change in the way, people are expecting, your applications to work, the way they are, expecting transactions to happen, the way they're expecting their data to be handled. It's humongous for organizations now to manage that level of expectations purely from a customer experience perspective. So now organizations are leaning into new age technologies. We're talking about AI, ML based technologies. We're talking about Fintechs. We're talking about startup ecosystem, which is again another area which becomes concern because these ecosystems are not that secure. They are focused on product. They're focused on delivering high-end technology, but security takes a backstage there. So with all of these and the kind of exposure that it creates, now we are in a world where you have a larger attack surface, you have more touch points on where your data can be exposed, your systems can be exposed. You have something which is as simple as a chat GPT, which somebody from even high school can use and create a malicious code and attack you. So today, the fight that cyber practitioners have is not just against trained cyber criminals. We're talking about anybody and everybody that can think and write a simple query, and that's the increased threat landscape that we have today.
Yes. Mukesh, actually, hearing Kushal's point very clearly about the increased attack surface, is there any specific threat areas that you can help us understand that organizations need to look out for?
I don't think anything specific I would be able to talk about because, as Kushal mentioned, I think the threat landscape has become so dynamic in nature. Especially post-pandemic, I think we are into a most complex ecosystem right now, where most of the organizations have started embracing and adopting a boundaryless architecture, where things can be stored in anywhere else, the systems can be hosted anywhere else, and people can access the data and the systems from anywhere else. So it becomes a far more complex for CISOs to handle at this point in time, because their environment is not actually within the closed ecosystem, right? So now it's not one data center to be protected. I think we have multiple environments, multiple systems, and it's completely boundaryless environment right now. I think that's point number one. Point number two is about the new age adoption of the technologies which organizations are embracing right now, including AI and ML, and adopting public cloud infrastructures at a bigger and faster pace, I would say. With all these things, I think now the threat landscape is becoming so dynamic and evolving in nature, and it's very tough to match up with that pace which is happening in that side.
Yes, absolutely. Kushal, with this ever-evolving threat landscape, what we are observing is organizations sort of shifting their strategy from a threat preventive approach more to a cyber defense model. Could you share your thoughts on this?
I believe there is no change per se where you talk about prevention, but I think so the emphasis now is on detection and response as well. Where earlier we used to talk about preventing everything, now we've realized that it's not possible to prevent everything. Your solution somewhere will have some loophole. All your security solutions will have certain limitations. So what do you do in such a situation where you cannot fend off all the attacks? The better thing to do is, one, you will have your protections in place, but you'll also create layers of detection. You'll also create layers of response. You'll create layers of recovery, because that really becomes your go-to place when there is an attack, and there will be an attack for sure, right? Organizations are now depending more on their capability to, one, understand what anomalies exist in their environment. Is the behavior, something different? Are we really looking at, some different patterns of, a user behavior or network behavior, even systems behaving differently, and then trying to respond to each anomaly with the understanding of what's happening across the world. So threat intelligence now plays a very crucial role, in your entire response strategy. You have to have connections to multiple threat intel partners who can tell you what's happening every single day. Because gone are the days when there was one malware which was released, and then you had some few weeks and months to respond to it. Today it's like you have a malware today, the next variant is the next day, and by the end of the month you have around 15 different variants of the same malware. So response to those events, rather, the threat landscape now is so different that the gangs or the cyber criminals are collaborating. So you have different groups working together. They say that I have a code, I have a different code. They come together, a new malware is born. That happens every single hour. You have a different variant coming in. Now it's nearly impossible for any security solution to block it. And that's where the emphasis, and that's where I believe now the strategy of shifting your entire focus to detection, response, and recovery has become crucial.
Wow. Thank you for that. That's really in-depth and understanding the rate at which the malwares can actually multiply is quite mind-boggling. What would you also say are some of the major concerns when it comes to approaching data security and privacy in organizations?
I think the basic understanding of privacy and understanding of what is critical data, that is the biggest challenge. Making your employees, and it's not just employees, let's increase the scope now with work from home. Your employees are working from home, and inadvertently a lot of other members get exposed to data, right? They understand people are talking on calls. You get exposed to a lot of information on the calls. Now, how do you protect that information as well? right? It's impossible for you to put in any control on what a person is talking, what a person is viewing, right? So one purely is the awareness piece that your employees need to understand what is sensitive, what can be spoken where, what can be looked at in what situations. You cannot really look at a confidential email on your phone in an elevator.
Right.
It's basic common
Basic,
sense,
yes.
right? But in your general tendency to complete work, maybe pressures, people forget these basic fundamentals, and that's where the first I would say threat to privacy comes from. Along with that, there is a lot of demand, I would say, and there is a lot of scope in pure cyber criminal terms. I would say there is a lot of scope for selling of data, right? So people are now interested in getting more and more data. The applications are multiple. The data can be used for marketing, the data can be used for some other scams, some campaigns for malware. A lot of things can happen. So now the onus of protecting data just doesn't reside with a cybersecurity professional. But I think so the onus shifts from the professionals to individuals who need to be more careful about handling their own data, handling the ecosystem in which the data is processed, or maybe they're viewing that data, and also understanding what could be the repercussions
Yes.
in case the data is not handled properly. I think so that's where the major focus should be.
Yes. Nakesh, let's get you in on this, your views on data protection and privacy, and perhaps some of the best practices we're seeing in the industry at the moment.
So I think Kushal spoke length and breadth of data privacy. I think I would say the biggest challenge of getting into a data privacy is about a cultural change, right? That's more important from individuals' perspective, especially a country like India where people are not used to a concept of privacy. Is something where we have to start with, right? People have to question, people have to understand what data to reveal, what data should not be revealed, to whom it is being shared with, and what is the purpose, right? Multiple other stuffs. And a country like us where we have a wide variety of use cases, I think there is definitely a law and regulations around it is required, which is a second point. The third is about, I think that regulation will obviously put additional obligations from the organizations or structured institutions to take privacy at a highest level. The third point is about the relevant technologies and tools which are required, especially to ensure the privacy is taken care of, right? These are the three things which we need to keep in mind. But I think the first one comes very, very, very important in terms of actually awareness, as Kushal mentioned, and especially the cultural change which needs to take privacy to a next level.
Yeah, great, fantastic. And speaking of the new technologies that are coming to the fore, let's talk a little bit about the digital transformation that we're seeing. Honing in perhaps for now in the BFSI sector, what is the role of fintechs and startups when it comes to strengthening and enhancing the cybersecurity landscape?
It's a very good question. In fact, I think the fintechs play a two-pronged role in actually ensuring that cybersecurity is taken care of. One is like fintech as a technology which is used for the business purposes, where they have a huge role to ensure that technology which they are bringing, the platform which they are bringing, has the necessary cybersecurity controls to ensure that the organization's cybersecurity posture is not compromised at any given point in time. That's point number one. Point number two is about the tech solutions also is embracing cybersecurity in a big way, where they come along with the financial technology solution which has a cybersecurity built in it as part of their overall holistic solution. That's the second thing. But long way to go, because most of the startup ecosystems are having very few employees, starting with the business logics, built in certain technologies, and then find a platform to get it used, right? So from cybersecurity perspective, there is nobody else or available in the fintech organizations. So mostly it is like collaborative work where organizations which are embracing such fintech solutions has to handhold them to ensure that the necessary cybersecurity controls are built as part of their product and solutions offering.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. just to bring you in on this about the solutions that we're seeing, cyber digital twins is emerging as one of these such solutions to really combat some of the threats to cybersecurity. Can you give us a little insight into where we stand today with this technology? What can it really offer that's different from what we've seen so far?
I think it's a fantastic solution, but purely from ecosystems which deal with a lot of physical infrastructure, right? Which cannot be tested on a frequent basis, or maybe if you really need to do some diagnosis, it's difficult to do it directly on those ecosystems. Yes. Digital twins really help you emulate the entire ecosystem into a digital space, a workspace kind of. And you can run your simulations. You can see it's as fancy as Iron Man working on that screen and making his suit. A digital twin is that. In reality, it's something similar, right? Where you can design, you can look at the flaws, you can see how it responds to certain stimuli, and if everything is working good, then you're good to go. I believe the earliest adoption is the Apollo 13, where they could actually patch the shuttle, but an application of a digital twin in the industry, and if I have to talk about the BFSI industry, I think it's still a long way, because there is not a lot of machinery that the BFSI industry handles. They have been traditionally working with different ecosystems for testing. So we have something called as the UAT, or your pre-production environments, where you have replicas of your production systems, your core banking applications and stuff, where you test them, and if there are any vulnerabilities, you try to fix them first in that environment. If everything works, kind of replicate. So it's kind of similar to what a digital twin could be. But I believe the way the industry is moving, there is a lot of innovation purely from automating stuff. There is a lot of robotics that is coming in. You have certain banks working on robots operating from branches. Now, if we are talking about testing these from remote locations, if you have to really test them on individual branches, that would be very difficult. But if you can from central location, where you have your tech team working on these prototypes, and if there is any fix that's needed, probably test it in this environment and send the fix, it saves a lot of cost. It saves a lot of effort as well. So I believe at this point in time, it's a bit far-fetched from what I can see for the BFSI industry, but I think there are certain applications, there are certain areas where adoption could be. Predominantly, I believe the manufacturing, mining industry to a large extent may utilize this. You have the SCADA systems, you have PLCs, you have a lot of machinery, operational technology that works. If that can be simulated in an environment for vulnerabilities, I believe that saves a lot of time for them.
Sure. What kind of investment do you think we can expect to see in the next 3 to 5 years when it comes to the digital twin technology across sectors? As you've mentioned, manufacturing being a predominant one, perhaps mining as well.
I believe, to be very true, a number is not something that comes to my mind immediately, because I don't have relevant exposure in those industries. But I think the way the adoption is happening, and if you refer to the latest threat reports, I believe these industries also are being targeted because they have lax security controls. Now, the adoption of a digital twin in such kind of an ecosystem, where you're talking about OT malware, you're talking about the entire system going down, your entire production lines are down. I believe there's a lot of investment that these industries could be looking at, in case if they can subvert some of the incidents that happen because of not being able to test something in time. So I believe, and this is a personal opinion, that a lot can be achieved in these industries using digital twins, but the exact use cases will have to come out very clearly.
Yes. Speaking of investments, Mukesh, what would you say should be sort of an approach by organizations when it comes to their strategy on the investments expected in cybersecurity, present day and moving forward, keeping in mind all the emerging technologies?
So I also don't want to throw a number right now, but what I feel is the relevant investments has to be appropriately devised based on the risk exposures and risk appetite of an organization, right? It changes from organization to organization, and it depends on the industry to industry how you are actually moving across. So as you rightly mentioned, I think some 3-4 years back, I think the manufacturing sector started getting into an industrial 4 revolution where they were talking about Internet of Things, putting all the devices in the supply chain ecosystem and manufacturing and connected with Internet. I think that was a journey which they started with the digital ecosystem, and we saw a lot of attack vectors which were specifically created for manufacturing, especially the critical infrastructure sectors, including energy, power, and a lot of other stuffs. I think that's the point, right? As and when you evolve and bring new technologies or new things in a place, and your business landscape gets changed, your actual ecosystem gets changed. I think there is a dire need of actually investing equally for actually securing those environment as well. In most of the regulated industries, I think this is happening, though there are challenges, but it's happening to quite an extent right now. But in non-regulated industries, especially like manufacturing, retail, or any other industry where it's not regulated, I think still it's a big challenge. I feel security should not be seen in silo for such investments. It has to be a part and parcel of the business strategies or business roadmap, how they want to look at the business models for next 3 years or 5 years, and then they have to put the relevant technology initiatives, and to support the technology initiatives and the business, they have to put the relevant security budgets as well. So that's how it needs to be looked at.
So Mukesh, as you mentioned in your introduction, you have more than 2 decades actually of experience in the cybersecurity space. What would you say as a CISO is one of your main challenges in this role?
I think it's not one, it's multifolded, right? Some of them I would like to just crease upon. One is definitely the changing and evolving threat landscape, the pace at which it grows and changes. As Kushal was mentioning about the advanced technique of developing a malware within few hours, it's something which is unimaginable, right? So no traditional approach or no traditional security tools can mitigate today's threats. That's point number one. Point number two, as we were discussing some time back, the next generation users, especially who are very dynamic in nature, who are very advanced in tech, they're literally tech savvies, and they don't have much of rules to follow. They try to bypass, or they enjoy bypassing the security controls to do their job. And these guys are sitting inside my organization, right? That's the biggest challenge, right? The next one is like the changing and evolving nature of consumers. The expectation of consumers from the data security perspective, the data privacy perspective, has increased a lot, right? There is a big awareness which is on the market side, where people are aware about what rights they have as part of their data, and they were very clear about their expectation and their rights, and they know the channels to reach out to the organization or to the relevant authorities. That's the third point. The fourth point is about the hype which was created on cyber and cybersecurity related incidences in a recent past by the media and the various forums, has really become a double-edged sword, which in some cases it has really helped to gain that traction in the board and with the management and getting the necessary investments. It has also created a huge paranoia at the side of board as well as the management to look at what's happening around the world, right? How we are ready for meeting those requirements. That paranoia is creating stress in the ecosystem, especially the CISO and the CISO's team are responsible for giving these updates to the board and to the management very frequently, right? These are the 3-4 challenges which comes to my mind at this point in time.
And as you've mentioned, keeping up with customer expectations, right, and the whole customer experience, given the experience economy that we're living in, customer expectations keep evolving and keep rising. So how do you sort of find that balance between the customer expectation and yet keeping up with all the security measures that are required?
So one of the point is customer experience is paramount important for running a business and ensuring that it's smooth successful, right? Because gone are the days where you can claim technology or a digital as a differentiator. In today's context, I think every business is onboarding and doing a complete business life cycle through a digital channels. So how you're going to actually differentiate yourself is through a seamless access and the experience which customers can get in throughout the life cycle and consistent experience which we provide to the consumers, right? And security can't be so stopper for such experiences. So the challenge for the CISOs is like always to strike a balance between the customer experience and to establish the necessary security controls to ensure that the regulatory requirements are met, the threat landscape is really understood and mitigated, and the risk is under the risk appetite of the organization. And that happens through various conversations, various trade-offs, and the prioritization of the controls and the convenience of the users.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, as we slowly come to a wrap, Kushal, I'd like to ask you your sort of closing comments on also the balance from the other point of view that organizations need to look at when it comes to all these emerging technologies that we've been talking about, as well as the people aspect, the talent aspect. How can you approach that to really ensure that the talent as well is sort of nurtured in the same way as the technological development?
I think challenge that organizations today face is every technology is outdated in 6 months, right? You bring in somebody, you train them, and in the next 6 months, you have a new technology come in. So how do you really, bridge that gap? That's number one challenge that most organizations have. The second challenge that organizations today have is retaining talent, right? The moment you have somebody who's experienced, who's good, there is going to be some sort of poaching. There is going to be some sort of better opportunity that people would be looking at. I believe the best approach is finding a right balance between one, having a bigger pool of people who are cross-trained, who can take over larger responsibilities, a learning center, within an organization that kind of focuses on developing talent, so that you are not dependent on talent, which is, kind of sourced from other, institutions. You can develop your own talent. You can, hire freshers. You can, mold them into the professionals that you can have. The benefit that these freshers have is they get first-hand training in an enterprise, right? And there is a commitment also that comes with that because they have the lure of an organizational experience. Growth is another aspect that they get, right? The other aspect is, creating the right environment. I believe that's where, organizations need to focus because the new generation of talent is very fickle-minded. Their demands are different, their work requirements are different. And I believe we need to now move to a more, flexible ecosystem, which kind of gives people a space to demonstrate or work on their creativity, because that's where most of the new generation kids want to be. They don't want structures, they don't want protocols. They would say that I would prefer working at nights. I'm not a morning person, right? Don't make me come at 8 o'clock in the morning. And it's very difficult for us because we have protocols, we have structures. So those structures, those protocols somewhere need to be, mended to have this kind of a talent, retained. The last aspect, I believe, is understanding the aspirations of, these people. They try a lot. They want to experiment. They don't want to, get married to a particular domain, right? it has to be something very lucrative for them to continue. So they would start with, say cybersecurity, and after a year decide, this is not working out for me, I may do digital marketing. I want to do digital marketing. And I have, students who do that every now and then. One is really understand what they want, what their strengths are, maybe also get into the process of helping them understand what their strengths are. And it's too much to ask for an organization to go to this extent. But I believe the kind of coaching and mentoring that is required for this new generation is very different than what the earlier generations needed. The earlier generations needed motivation, to just get onto the job and get things done. But this generation needs motivation to understand what the job is, and do I really want to do this job? So it's kind of changed. The landscape has changed. Your HR practices will have to evolve, I think.
Wow. Fascinating. So it's really sort of getting into the psyche aspect of how the workforce needs to be approached today versus in the previous generations. That's really fascinating. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We've covered such a wide gamut of the whole world, really, of cyber attacks, cyber security, the threat landscape, emerging technology, and now the human aspect as well when it comes to the talent. Thank you so much for this in-depth conversation and being with us today.
Thank you so much.
Devina.
All right, well, on that note, it's a wrap from us today. That's all we have for you. But for more such in-depth conversations, do stay tuned to ET Studios. Until next time, many thanks for watching.